This is the next part of God's Smuggler by Brother Andrew and the Sherrills. And remember, at first he was not accepted, Brother Andrew was not accepted at WEC, World Evangelization Crusade, because there was no room. And then he decided to go anyway to Glasgow. And now we find that he is accepted, and we have the story of what happens in this schooling and how he manages his money, not his money, but God's money, and how he learns to trust God in the circumstances where he has to have faith to believe that his loving Father is able to provide what he needs. Hope you enjoy the reading. This time I had no trouble finding my way to the address I wanted. I walked up the hill carrying my suitcase until I came to number 10 Prince Albert Road. The building itself was a tall, two-story house on the corner. A low stone wall ran around the property. I could see the stump ends of iron railings in it, melted for scrap during the war, no doubt. Over the entrance on a wooden archway were the words, "Have faith in God." This I knew was the main purpose of the 2-year course at Glasgow, to help the student learn all he could about the nature of faith, to learn from books, to learn from others, and to learn from his own encounters. With fresh enthusiasm, I walked under the arch and up the white pebbled path to the house, through the door. My knock was answered by Keys. How good it was to look into that solid Dutch face again. After we had slapped one another's shoulders many times, he seized my bag and ushered me to my top floor room. He introduced me to my 3 roommates, showed me the fire escape, and pointed out that where the rest of the 43 young people slept, men in one of the attached houses and women in the other. "And ne'er the twain shall meet," Keith said. "We are hardly supposed to talk to the girls. The only time we can see them is at dinner." Keith sat with me through the formal introduction to the director, Stuart Dinan. "The real purpose of this training," Mr. Dinan told me, "is to teach our students that they can trust God to do what he said he would do. We don't go from here into the traditional missionaries' field, but into new territory. Our graduates are on their own. They cannot be affected if they are afraid or if they doubt that God really means what he says in his word. So here we reach not so much ideas as trusting. So here we teach not so much ideas as trusting. I hope that there is what you are looking for in this school, Andrew. God trusts us and we trust God's word. So here in WEC we teach not so much ideas as trusting in him." Yes, sir, exactly. "As for finances," he goes on, "you know, of course, Andy, that we charge no tuition. That's because we have no paid staff. The teachers, the London people, myself, none of us receives a salary. Room and board and other physical costs for the year come to only £90, a little over $250. It's as low as this because the students do the cooking, the cleaning, everything themselves. But we do request the £90 in advance. Now I understand you will not be able to do this." "No, sir." "Well, it's also possible to pay in installments, £30 at the start of each session. But for your sake and for ours, we like to insist that the installment be paid on time." This is Barbara speaking, as far as the way WEC was doing it, the students do the cooking, the cleaning. That's what we did as in Youth with a Mission in YWAM. We had a mansion house in London, just outside of London, and the Lord had arranged for us, and there were 60 of us, and we staff and students. And so we did the yard work, we did the cleaning, the cooking, and it was an amazing building. 8 of us in our dormitory, with 1 bathroom, and the bunk beds were 3 in line, 3 up. So I feel for him because we lived by faith too, and we had to put, not had to, but we chose to put money into the company, the group, because they needed that money for the food. They needed it for the rent of the place, of the mansion. And so it was that he had to bring that money, $30 or £30 each semester. So, well, it's also possible to pay in installments, I repeat, £30 at the start of each session. But for your sake and for ours, we like to insist that the installments be paid on time. Yes, sir, I altogether agree. I did agree too. This was going to be my first experiment in trusting God for the material needs of life. I had the £30 I'd bought from Holland for the first semester's fee, and after this I really looked forward to seeing how God was going to supply the next money. During the first few weeks, however, something kept happening that bothered me. At mealtimes, the students would frequently discuss inadequate funds. Sometimes after a whole night in prayer for a certain need, half of the request would be granted, or 3/4. If an old people's home, for example, where students conducted services, needed 10 blankets, the students would perhaps receive enough to buy them 6. The Bible said that we were workers in God's vineyard. Was this the way the Lord of the vineyard paid his hired men? One night, I went out for a long solitary walk. On several occasions, students had warned me not to go into Patrick. Patrick was the slum sitting at the bottom of our hill. It was, they said, the home of addicts, drunks, thieves, even murderers, and walking its streets was unsafe. And yet this area drew me now as if it had something to say. All around me were the dirty grey streets of Patrick. Litter blew across the cobblestones. The September air was already raw. Before I had gone 5 blocks, I was accosted 2 times by beggars. I gave them all the money I had in my pockets and watched as they moved without pretense toward the nearest pub. I knew that these drifters, begging in the streets of the Glasgow slums, would receive a better income than the missionaries in training at the top of the hill. I couldn't understand why this bothered me so. Was I greedy? I didn't think so. We'd always been poor, and I'd never worried about it, but what was it then? And suddenly, walking back up the hill toward the school, I had my answer. The question was not one of money at all. What I was worried about was a relationship. At the chocolate factory, I trusted Mr. Ringers to pay me in full and on time. Surely, I said to myself, if an ordinary factory worker could be financially secure, so could one of God's workers. I turned through the gate at the school. Above me was the reminder, have faith in God. That was it. It wasn't that I needed the security of a certain amount of money. It was that I needed the security of relationship with God. I walked up the crunchy pebble walk, feeling more and more certain that I was on the verge of something exciting. The school was asleep and quiet. I tiptoed upstairs and sat by the bedroom window looking out over Glasgow. If I were going to give my life as a servant of the King, I had to know that King. What was he like? In what way could I trust him? In the same way I trusted a set of impersonal laws? Or could I trust him as a loving leader or a living leader? As a very present commander in battle? The question was central, because if he were a king in name only, I'd rather go back to the chocolate factory, and I would remain a Christian, but I would know that my religion was only a set of principles, excellent and to be followed, but hardly demanding devotion. Suppose, on the other hand, that I were to discover God to be a person, in the sense that he communicated and cared and loved and led. That was something quite different. That was the kind of king I would follow into battle. And somehow, sitting there in the moonlight that September night in Glasgow, I knew that my probing into God's nature was going to begin with this issue of money. That night I knelt in front of the window and made a covenant with him. Lord, I said, I need to know if I can trust you in practical things. I thank you for letting me earn the fees for the first semester. I ask you now to supply the rest of them. If I have to be so much as a day late in paying, I shall know that I'm supposed to go back to the chocolate factory. It was a childish prayer, petulant and demanding, but then I was still a child in the Christian life. The remarkable thing is that God honored my prayer, but not without first testing me in some rather amusing ways. The first semester sped by. Mornings we spent in the classroom studying systematic theology, homiletics, world religions, linguistics, the type of courses taught in any seminary. In the afternoon we worked at practical skills, bricklaying, plumbing, carpentry, first aid, tropical hygiene, motor repair. For several weeks, all of us, girls as well as boys, worked at the Ford factory in London, learning how to take a car apart and put it together. In addition to these standard trades, we were taught to build huts out of palm fronds and how to make mud jars that would hold water. And meanwhile, we took turns in the kitchen and the laundry and the garden. No one was exempt. Going back to my story, one of the things on my first day at Youth with a Mission was very interesting because they called us as a team to go outside and work in the yard. But I hadn't worn jeans at this time, never worn jeans, and certainly didn't have any boots. And I wore dresses or skirts. And I went out there ready to help where I could. And they said, you can't work in the yard in a dress or a skirt. I don't know what I was wearing at the time. They said, you've got to go put your jeans on and put boots on. I said, I don't have any jeans. I've never worn them, and I haven't got any boots. So they had to arrange to find some for me. But, what was so funny was the thing I said to the Lord when he called me to Youth with a Mission, to YWAM. When he said, you're going to go to YWAM, I said, but they're so proud and they wear jeans. So in the Lord's, it's so funny, isn't he? First day on the job at the mansion at Youth with a Mission, he asked me to wear jeans. I did, and boots, and I worked in the yard. The weeks passed so fast that soon it came time for me to head out onto the first of several training trips of evangelism. You're going to like this, Andy, said Mr. Dinan. It's an exercise in trust. The rules are simple. Each student on your team is given a £1 banknote. With that, you go on a missionary tour through Scotland. You're expected to pay your own transportation, your own lodging, your food, any advertising you want to do, the renting of halls, providing refreshments. All on £1 note? Worse than that, he continues, when you get back to school after 4 weeks, you're expected to pay back the £1. I laughed. Sounds like we'll be passing the hat all the time. Oh, you're not allowed to take up collections. Never. You're not to mention money at your meetings. All of your needs have got to be provided without any manipulation on your part, or the experiment is a failure. I wonder how you and I would work on that one. I was a member of a team of 5 boys. Later, when I tried to reconstruct where our funds came from during those 4 weeks, it was hard to find out. It seemed that what we needed was always just there. Sometimes a letter would arrive from one of the boys' parents with a little money. Sometimes we would get a check in the mail from a church we'd visited. The notes that came with these gifts were always interesting. This is what they might say. I know you don't need money, or you would have mentioned it, someone would write. But God just wouldn't let me get my sleep tonight until I had put this in an envelope for you. Contributions frequently came in the form of produce. In one little town in the Highlands of Scotland, we were given 600 eggs. We had eggs for breakfast, eggs for lunch, eggs as hors d'oeuvres, before a dinner of eggs with an egg white meringue dessert. It was before we could look at it. It was weeks before we could look a chicken in the eye. But money or produce, we stuck fast to 2 rules. We never mentioned a need aloud, and we gave away a tithe of whatever came to us as soon as we got it, within 24 hours if possible. Another team that set out from school at the same time we did was not so strict about tithing. They set aside their 10% all right, but they didn't give it away immediately, in case we run out of it for an emergency. Of course they had emergencies, so did we, every day. But they ended their month owing money to hotels, lecture halls, and markets all over Scotland, while we came back to school almost £10 ahead. Fast as we could give money away, God was always swifter, and we ended with money to send to the work overseas. There were times before the end of the tour, however, when it looked as though the experiment was failing. One weekend, we were holding meetings at Edinburgh. We had attracted a large group of young people for the first day and were casting about for a way to get them to come back the next. Suddenly, without consulting anyone, one of the team members stood up and made an announcement. Before the meeting tomorrow evening, he said, "We'd like you all to have tea with us. 4:00. How many think they can make it?" A couple of dozen hands went up, and we were committed. At first, instead of being delighted, the rest of us were horrified. All of us knew that we had no tea, no cake, no bread and butter, and exactly 5 cups. Nor did we have money to buy these things. Our last penny had gone to rent the hall. This was going to be a real test of God's care. And for a while, it looked as though he was going to provide everything through the young people themselves. After the meeting, several of them came forward and said they would like to help. One offered milk, another half a pound of tea, another sugar. One girl even offered to bring the dishes. Our tea was rapidly taking shape, but there was one thing still missing, the cake. Without cake, these Scottish boys and girls wouldn't consider tea tea. So that night in our evening prayer time, we put the matter before God. "Lord, we've got ourselves into a spot. From somewhere we've got to get a cake. Will you help us?" That night, as we rolled up in our blankets on the floor of the hall, we played guessing games. How was God going to give us that cake? Among the 5 of us, we guessed everything imaginable, or so we thought. Morning arrived. We half expected a heavenly messenger to come to our door bearing a cake, but no one came. The morning mail arrived. We ripped open the 2 letters, hoping for money. There was none. A woman from a nearby church came by to see if she could help. Cake was on the tip of our tongues, but we swallowed the word and shook our heads. Everything, we assured her, is in God's hands. The tea had been announced for 4:00 in the afternoon. At 3 the tables were set, but still we had no cake. 3:30 came. We put on water to boil. 3:45. And then the doorbell rang. All of us together ran to the big front entrance, and there was the postman. In his hand was a large box. "Hello, lads," said the postman. "Got something for you that feels like a food package." He handed the box to one of the guys. "The delivery day is over, actually," he said, "but I hate to leave a perishable package overnight." We thanked him profusely, and the minute he closed the door, the boy solemnly handed me the box. "It's for you, Andrew, from a Mrs. William Hopkins in London." I took the package and carefully unwrapped it. Off it came the twine. Off came the brown outside paper. Inside there was no note, only a large white box. Deep in my soul, I knew that I could afford the drama of lifting the lid slowly. As I did, there, in perfect condition, to be admired by 5 sets of wondering eyes, was an enormous, glistening, moist chocolate cake. I'm going to stop there because we have more experiences with the Lord and trusting Him for money and for other things. I wonder how you're doing with trusting God. I know for me it was hard. I know I had to really be on my knees. Sometimes I wouldn't eat anything because I hadn't paid toward the group. And so I would fast until it came in. Other times I would look for the mailman or go to the post or look for people to give it to me because I wasn't going to ask. But I realized the principle was it was no good looking for man to give, to support me. I had to look to God. It's just like healing. You don't look to the doctor for healing. You don't even look to yourself to know what to do, how to heal yourself. You do what you can, but you look to God, the healer. So everything goes back to God to glorify Him. And this story, just with about a cake, glorifies God, doesn't it? They could have made one if somebody had given them money. But how much more do we glorify God for this person, the Hopkins, sending this cake sometime before God knew that they were going to ask for a cake? And here they were. I do hope you learn to go the next step with your trust with God. In the old days, I would say, take off your watch and try and spend 24 hours with the Holy Spirit and say, what do I do next? Not even looking at the time. What a challenge it was. Want to try it? God bless you.